The year is 1964. The Cold War is at its height. Khrushchev rules the Soviet Union with an iron fist. However, American families bask in a prosperity the country has never known before. It means ever-increasing leisure time, and that time is usually filled with entertainment created by a single man whose influence would forever impact our cultural landscape. Walt Disney, the king of animation, the creator of Mickey Mouse, and the inventor of Disneyland, is about to achieve another triumph, the release of Mary Poppins. The crowds lining Hollywood Boulevard are eagerly awaiting the stars of the new film. From this night forward, the movie will be seen by millions around the world, creating a huge hit for the studio. Mary Poppins launched the film career of Julie Andrews, brought the comedic antics of Dick Van Dyke to a huge audience, and indelibly burned the song Chim Chim Cheree into most of our minds. It also enchanted us with many memorable visual effects. Walt Disney had taken over 10 years to convince author P.L. Travers to let him bring her stories of the magical English nanny to the screen. After casting Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke, rehearsals began. In keeping with Disney's long-standing production philosophy, the film was to be shot entirely at his Burbank, California studios. But before the filming could begin, hundreds of illustrations and sketches had to be created to help define the look of Edwardian London. To add the storybook style and the unique magic of Mary Poppins, many intricate and complicated special visual effects would be required. The movie was a huge success and would go on to be nominated for 13 Academy Awards, eventually winning 6. The newcomer to film, Julie Andrews, of course, won for Best Actress. The songwriting team of the Sherman Brothers won for Best Score and Best Song. And for Best Achievement in Visual Effects, Oscars were awarded to Hamilton Luske, Eustace Lysette, and Peter Ellenshaw. Peter Ellenshaw is a self-taught artist from England. Schooled in the visual effects technique of matte painting, he had come over from the British film industry just 10 years earlier. The Academy Award that evening reflected Peter's ability to create the fantasy of turn-of-the-century London for modern audiences. What was not evident to the film-going public at that time was Peter's ongoing contribution to numerous Walt Disney projects, from specialty work for the newly built Disneyland to astounding special effects shots involving miniatures, painted backgrounds, and camera optical tricks.
One of the most exciting things I think ever happened to me was when I first met Walt Disney. We made a kind of, the wonderful part was that with Walt, that he either accepted you or didn't accept you, and if he didn't accept you, you felt very bad. But he was very nice and we had a great rapport.
Born in London just as World War I was breaking out. The beginning of the new century was about to see the end of empires and harsh times for all of England. Peter was raised by his mother alone. The youngest of 3 children, the family struggled to make ends meet.
It goes back a long way. Up to then, my life had been quite different. I had only gone to school till I was 14, and because I hadn't been a very good scholar, I had to go out to work in a garage, and not knowing anything about garages, I was just put in as a person who greased the cars. Now, we didn't have the grease machinery that they do now. You had to do it by lying on the floor and pump in a little thing about this size, and pushing it on all the grease nipples. I hated that work. I hated it. And I thought, my God, I used to lie on the floor and think, when is this going to end? I'm not going to go through life like this. A man came to the area who'd worked in films in France, and I was told about this. I thought, gosh, I'm going to go and see him, see if I can't get a job. During the time I was in the garage work, I had been working at night, drawing and painting and learning to paint. For some reason I cannot tell, but I had become quite proficient at drawing. So when this man came round who had worked in France in films and special effects, when I went to see him, he said, "Well, what do you want?" I said, "Well, I'd like you to tell me some about film business, if maybe I could get a job." "Well, what can you do?" I said, "Well, I can draw and maybe you could help me." He took me on as his assistant. This is the most remarkable thing.
Walter Percy Day had been trained at London's prestigious Royal Academy as a portrait painter. Day emigrated to France, where he lived and worked for many years, creating visual effects on dozens of French productions. Here, on Abel Gance's Napoleon, Day created not only effects, but did some acting as well. Having hit hard times, he returned to England, settling in the village of Iver, coincidentally across the street from a young Peter Ellenshaw.
And he took me on as his assistant, probably 5 shillings a week, which is absolutely, he couldn't afford anything. He was not earning very much money anyway at that time. But bless him, he was the man that saved me. So he said, "You better study perspective when you go home." God, whoever looked at a book on perspective and you've never been to really serious school, it was very tricky. But he was a good taskmaster. I worked from dawn to dusk, every day of the week.
Before we go much further with our story, we should explain a crucial special effects technique that was Peter's forte and has been widely used from the early silent pictures right up to today. The technique, which is called matte painting, consists of hanging a sheet of glass between the camera and the set. An artist well schooled in perspective can then paint buildings into the frame, add a town on the Mississippi, or add on to the sets in a Roman epic.
Let's imagine, first of all, the simplest form of a matte shot, and that is if one puts a glass in front of the camera far enough away so that it can be in focus as well as the background.
To illustrate this, let's say the producer needs a shot of a castle for a new King Arthur picture. The company has found a little villa to shoot, but it's not big enough. They need a really large-scale castle. So the matte artist comes to the set and carefully paints a castle on a sheet of glass just in front of the camera, matching in perspective the actual villa. And voila! The camera records a huge castle where only a villa stands. With a so-called matte shot, the painting covers only part of the image, fooling the eye. The rest of the screen will have actors playing their roles.
By the way, the only reason why you can't tell it's a glass shot is that thankfully that we only have one eye. The camera can't tell when it's looking through its little lens how far away anything is unless you move the camera. Now, you don't move the camera when you're shooting at a glass shot, unless you're on a nodal head. We won't go into that.
Another method of adding a painting to a shot is, rather than painting the castle onto a glass on the set, merely paint or put a black mask in front of the camera. This allows the artist to complete the painting and put the shot together in its entirety back in the studio.
You put a mask up when you're shooting this original scene to hide the part that you want to paint in later. Now you can paint the actual painting onto that black mask.
By utilizing paintings that look so photographically real, film producers can save vast amounts of money by not having to build enormous sets or find expensive backgrounds. Even foreground window frames can be a matte painting.
Fiddle faddle. That's the general epidemic as far as she's concerned.
An elaborate French chateau is